Good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending our webinar today on boosting your business finances. I'll just do a few introductions before we start. Some of you will remember the series we did last year with Joe Sword and his team from Nordens, but I'll just do a few introductions again. So I'm Greg Guilford, the CEO of HR Solutions. Obviously, we have Joe Sword, who's the head of strategic business planning from Nordens. Victoria Templeton, our HR knowledge manager, a familiar face to all. And we have Adam Trulock, the tax manager at Nordens, and we also have Darren Han, the strategic business advisor and head of corporate finance from Nordens as well. We also have Drew Naggis, our digital marketing exec, who'll be able to help us with any technical questions you might have as we go through the session. Just a bit of housekeeping. Everyone is on mute other than the presenters today. That's really just so that we can focus on the presentation, but obviously we do want to interact with you as much as we can, so you do have the option to ask questions as we go through, and there'll be an option at the end for us to ask any questions to the panelists that you raised. Some of you have been on our webinars before, but it's just a reminder in terms of how to ask those questions. You should see something very similar to what's on your screen now in terms of the question panel. Quite simply put your questioning in there. That will be held until the end of the webinar when we'll ask those questions to the panelists. If you are having any technical questions as we go, you can also use that section to ask those as well, and we'll answer those as we go through. We do want to answer as many questions as possible, so just as you think of them, just write them in there, and they might get answered through the session, but we'll try and circle back as many as we can at the end. Those who've been on our webinars before, we do try to make them interactive with polls as well. So there's a series of questions and polls that will pop up on your screen as we go through, and Victoria Templeton will be helping coordinate those for us. That's the housekeeping out of the way, so I'm going to now pass you over to Joe Sword, who's going to lead the rest of the webinar.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. So, as Greg's mentioned, my name is Joe Sword. I'm the Strategic Advisory Director at Nordens, and I'm joined today by my two colleagues, Darren Han, who heads up our Corporate Finance Division, and Adam Trulock, who heads up our Tax Department, both specialists in their field, and they'll be able to give us all some good insight today. So we've worked with thousands of business owners over the years, and because of this, we believe that we have the ability to support and help many of you move your business to the next level. And we strongly believe that achieving success shouldn't be a lonely path that business owners walk down by themselves, and successful business owners and people in general appreciate this and surround themselves with a support network of specialists to help them along the way. And if you look at top athletes, top business people, or basically anyone at the top of their field, they all have coaches to keep them focused and guide them in the right direction. So when they're executing their talents, it hits the spot as often as possible. And when you hear interviews or listen to these people talking about their successes, they often refer back to their coach as a vital component of that success. And we truly believe that every business owner is capable of achieving their dreams. So how will today work? In a nutshell, myself and my colleagues will sort of brief the area, outline the area, give a few thoughts from our point of view, and then there will be some polls and questions for you to answer. And of course, as we go through, as Greg's already mentioned, if anyone has any questions, just pop a message in the chat box, or if you have any problems, pop a message in the chat box, give us some sort of signal, and we'll do our best to help. So let's get going, and we'll start with cash flow and cash flow forecasting, which is probably as important as it's ever been, given the current climate that we're all operating in. And I came across a stat that 82% of small businesses fail due to cash flow, which is a huge, huge amount. And we feel the biggest problem of all is not actually being aware of your current and future cash position in the first place. And that is why whenever I'm speaking to business owners, whenever me, Darren, and our team are speaking with business owners, we place such an emphasis on your cash flow forecast. And when we're referring to forecasting, we often use the analogy of a sat-nav that most people nowadays use in their cars. You enter the destination and the sat-nav will create the best route for you to take. Now, the route may be different depending on traffic, roadworks and whatnot than you're used to, and could possibly change, but that end destination generally won't. And we find a lot of unsuccessful business owners are not actually clear on their destination in the first place. So by default, they can't even gauge if they're heading in the right direction. And this is where your financial forecast can really help, because you set that end goal and you're able to break it down and see the steps you need to take and the targets that you need to reach to make sure you get to that. What it will do is it will show you where gaps are along the way that you can actually proactively fill before they become critical, as opposed to acting reactively and in desperation, therefore making much better and more successful decisions. And the phrase cash is king is bandied about quite a lot, and more than ever in these times, it's so true. So it's just so important to give you and your business the best chance. You have to be planning ahead. So we'd like to jump into a poll now. The first poll we'd like to open up is around your cash flow forecasting in and around your business. So of the 4 options, which best describes your cash flow forecasting in your business? So you have scenario-based cash flow forecasts, and you do models around that you compare to your actuals in real time. So you're basically all over your forecasting. You're in a really good place. You have a cash flow forecast, but you don't really test multiple scenarios. And this is where forecasting can be really beneficial. You know, you can be left with a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and all of a sudden you feel really comfortable because, you know, basically if things go really, really bad, you've still got a potential way forward. You have a simple cash flow forecast, but you only really look at it on an ad hoc basis. You probably could do more. Or the position where we don't really want any businesses to be in is that you don't actually have a cash flow forecast at all. So a few more seconds just to jot your answers in there, and then we can have a look where everyone is at in terms of their cash flow forecasting in their business at the moment. So when everyone's
leave it a few more moments. Okay, so let's close that and share the results for you. There we go. You should be able to see on the screen there.
Cool. So we've got a 50-50 split, the 2 middle ones. So some people have got cash flow forecast, but they don't actually test the multiple scenarios. So you've sort of done part of it and you're in a reasonably good place. But I think testing those multiple scenarios and what we call what if drivers within your forecasts are really important, because it will help you perhaps take a different perspective on things and ultimately help you make decisions. And some of you have a simple cash flow forecast, but you only look at it on an ad hoc basis. Now, you've made the effort to do a cash flow forecast, but only looking at it ad hoc might mean that you fall behind, or you miss potential opportunities, or you miss potential points and pinch points where things can be starting to become critical. So I think perhaps for those people that are not really looking at it on a regular basis, I would be making sure that you're making a bit more of an effort to look at that more regularly, or get reported to on your cash position and your cash drivers a bit more regularly. It's good to see that everyone has some sort of cash flow forecast, so that's fantastic. But I think the ideal place that you want to get to is to have those, you know, the cash modeling around different scenarios, which will help you make more decisions that you feel more comfortable with, and they're better informed. So it's good to see that no one's at the bottom, but I think there's potential ways that people can develop their cash flow forecasting, basically, and that's obviously where we can come in and help should you need it. So we'll jump into the next poll straight after, and the next poll is all around reporting on your cash flow, which is really, really important to help you gauge where you are. So very simple. How frequently do you report on your cash flow? Do you do it weekly, or even more frequently than that? Do you do it monthly? Do you do it quarterly? Or do you take it longer do you do it over a longer period of time than a quarterly basis? So same again, if you can jump on and just answer how frequently you report on your cash flow, that would be fantastic.
Okay, I'll give it a little bit longer. And I'll close the poll and share the results for you. There you go.
Fantastic. So it seems like, although there's possibly some improvements to be made in the cash flow forecasting itself, it seems like you're in a good place with your reporting. And I generally say monthly is the absolute max that you'd want to be reporting on it in these critical times that we're operating in, the state of the economy and everything else. You probably want to report on it report on your cash flow a bit more frequently than monthly, but monthly is definitely a good starting point. And then those of you that are reporting weekly or more frequently, then that's fantastic. And I suppose it's maybe then just looking at your reporting and asking, are these reports or the way I'm getting reported to helping me make decisions? And if it is, fantastic, because that's exactly where you want to be. And I suppose ultimately the businesses who manage their cash well are left with the most options, because although there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, there are also a lot of opportunities to be had. So it allows you to make decisions not only to sort of self-preservate, but to take your business to the next level. And moving on to one of the biggest dents to any business's cash flow is customers not paying when they're expected, or even worse than that, not paying at all. And that's where understanding trends and making the most of your data and information, such as which customers generally pay late, do you have a clear process for vetting your customers in the first place before taking them on? They're things that will help you predict issues you may have down the line. And one really good way to do this is to run a credit check on your customers. And that's something that we probably encourage most businesses to do on their own business on a regular basis as well, just so you're aware of your own credit score potentially changing. So again, jumping straight into another poll, it is all around your customer vetting, your credit control procedures. So in your eyes, how would you rate your customer vetting and your credit control procedures in your business? So extremely strong, and we would sort of gauge that as being fully systemized and regularly tested. Good to strong, so it's mostly systemized, but it's only occasionally tested, or some sort of variation on that. You're honest and you say it could be better. You know, there's improvements to be made, just possibly haven't got round to them yet, or they're not being done for a certain reason, or you literally don't really have any formal procedures or vetting, or have strong credit control procedures in place at all. So again, we'll give you a few more seconds to just jot down your thoughts on there, and we'll see where you're all at with your customer vetting and credit control procedures in your business.
Okay, I'll close that and share the results.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got everyone's basically saying good to strong, so mostly systemized and tested occasionally. So I think ultimately getting it fully systemized and perhaps increasing the testing of it just to make sure it's as strong and as robust as it possibly can be is the way to go. But that's really good to see, because it's really, really important, especially now more than ever in these tough times. So having really, really good procedures for vetting your customers to make sure you're not taking on what we would class as bad customers, and also your credit control procedures, fantastic. So
Okay.
they're just a few insights into things that we've seen, things that we found regarding cash flow that you need to be aware of. You know, your cash flow forecasting, making sure your customers are vetted if at all possible, and making sure you have good quality credit control procedures in place. They're very, very key tools to helping you move your business forward, keep your business sustainable, and ultimately achieve success. So moving on to the profitability side of things now, because cash and profit are two different things, of course. So in a nutshell, there are just two key ways to increase your profitability. As you can see on the slide, increasing your turnover or reducing your costs. Sounds simple, of course, but blindly doing either may cause you significant issues, such as overtrading or cutting costs to a level where, you know, you start taking shortcuts, which ends up leaving you dropping your standards in the process, and inevitably you will end up losing more business than you gain. So getting balance is key. And like we've mentioned around your cash flow, having these scenario-based forecasts in place are really key, as it will help you understand sort of how you can grow in the right way without taking too much risk, but pushing yourself all the same. So too often, one of the things that we really see with businesses is they report on things like turnover and costs, particularly direct costs like the above the line costs, on one line. So you've basically got all your income streams linked in as turnover, and then all your costs linked in as costs. And it's very, very difficult when you're reporting like that to actually see what's causing your business issues. And the more you can drill down and understand those separate segments, the more you'll understand your business, because it's really, really essential in these moving times. As one market or product that you had that was previously really profitable has deteriorated rapidly over the years because costs have been creeping up perhaps, and you haven't realised how much until it's actually started detrimenting your overall profitability. And on the flip side, areas that perhaps were once classed by yourself as the loss leader have now become profitable in their own right due to perhaps advances in technology or other ways of streamlining those type of services. So breaking it down to the necessary level will give you much more clarity, and it will also help you sort of expose issues and problems and highlight areas to scale. So what we'd like to do now is put up a slide which shows a few different illustrations based on different scenarios and how each of them will play a part and affect the business's profitability. So for this illustration that we can see on the screen, we've used a hypothetical company turning over £1 million with a 25% gross profit margin, overheads of 100,000, leaving it with a profit of 150,000, which equates to a 15% net profit margin. So the first scenario on the screen, the furthest left scenario, is the impact of an inflationary increase to all your costs. We've put in the current rate of around 9.1%. So if you keep your prices the same, you can see from that illustration just how much it hampers your bottom line profit. Of course, not every single cost will rise with inflation. Some may even rise more, some may rise less, but this is all hypothetical. But what we're aiming to do is just show you the impact. So if all your costs went up by the current level of inflation and you didn't do anything with your own pricing, you actually reduce your net profit by over 50%. So basically your net profit drops from that 15% or 150K to 7% or 73,000. So you can just see the impact of costs creeping up and how detrimental it can be to your profitability. The next scenario basically illustrates the impact of offering a 15% discount to your customers. Now, discounting is something that happens often more in the startup stage or where there's an incentive to win new business. And in practice, this scenario is not likely to happen exactly how it's laid out here, as you generally offer discounts to win new work. But let's hypothetically say, like, to retain customers, you're going to give them a discount. You can see by giving that 15% discount, you've basically wiped away all your profit in this scenario. So it's not to say don't discount, but it's just to say be careful when you're offering discounts, because, you know, giving away discounts can often really, really hamper your profit because it's all basically coming off your bottom line. And the third scenario is around price increases. So the opposite of what we were talking about, where let's say hypothetically your costs stay the same or stay stable, or your price increases are outweighing your cost increases by 5%. So what a small 5% price increase in this scenario, it actually equates to a 33% increase in this company's net profit. So I think it's really just taking into account how it's important to be on the ball with increasing your prices or monitoring your prices, because not only are costs going up, but it's a great way for you to become more profitable. Of course, we're not sort of advising you to start taking liberties with it by any stretch, but I think it's important that, you know, you are considering your price increases on a regular basis. So this brings us in nicely to the first poll on this section, which will be, when is the last time you actually increased your prices in your business? In the last 6 months? Within the last year? Within the last 2 years? Longer than 2 years? Or you've kept your prices the same for many years, or as long as you can remember? So we'll give a couple of a minute or so to put that in, and then we'll see what everyone is saying around that price increase. And it's something when you're knee deep in your business, working in it, I should say, and you're very, very busy. It's something that often can be forgotten about. So having a system in place where you're re-quoting or at least reviewing the fees on a regular basis is really important. So we'll see how we've got on here and where everyone's positioned in terms of their price increases in their business.
Okay, I'm going to close the polls and share the results with you.
Wow, okay. So within the last 2 years, and I mean, it's not going to be the same for every single business, because some businesses are tied into contracts depending on the type of work you do. You may not have the opportunity, but I think hopefully the illustration previously shows is the impact it can actually have of you not being able to, or you not choosing to, or you just not increasing your prices. So everyone has said within the last 2 years. So you've obviously been through the process of a price increase, but in my mind, given the way costs are likely to be going up in most businesses, I think it's something to perhaps look at reconsidering off the back of today, because it probably needs to be done more frequently, just because of the rate with everyone's costs are going up, really. So while increasing your prices is the easiest way to boost your profit, as it literally goes onto your top line as turnover, onto your bottom line as profit, there's only so much you can raise your prices, especially in the world that we live in now. Everything's crunched, everyone's under pressure with their own living costs, their own costs, and everyone's looking for the cheapest or the most value. So it's getting the balance, basically, like we've sort of mentioned. So you'll need to look at other ways of boosting your profit alongside price increases. The fourth column illustrates how 10% growth for the business equates to 17% extra net profit. Now, the illustration assumes overheads don't increase, which in reality they may do slightly, but they shouldn't really be increasing by a huge amount at that level. So 10% growth equates to 17% extra net profit if everything else is equal, which again is a significant amount. So what ways can you consider for growing? It's easy to say, oh yeah, just grow by 10%, but what can you look at? So a few things that we advise our clients to look at are upselling. So moving your customers onto a more lucrative, higher product or service. We call it upgrading, where they're perhaps on, say, for example, they're on the bronze or silver package and they could go onto the gold package, and it's about having that conversation with them, explaining why you feel it will benefit them and that it would be beneficial for them. The other thing is shortening your purchasing period, so getting your customers or clients to buy from you more frequently. You can look at things like cross-selling, selling complementary products or services to your existing customers, whether that's other services that potentially partners that you collaborate with offer, or cross-selling existing services that you provide within your business already. There's also diversifying. So there's a book out there called Blue Ocean Strategy. Some of you may have seen it, read it. It basically explains how you can take aspects of products or industries and developing or combining products and services with other industries and create something brand new. And they use the example in the book of Cirque du Soleil. And it's a great example. They discuss where they took the aging and unattractive sort of low-end circus industry at the time and created luxury, high-end industry by shifting the buyer group from the would generally be the end users of the circus to adults, the purchasers of the circus tickets for their kids, effectively. And what they did is they drew upon the strengths of other industries such as the theatre, Broadway shows and the opera, which were all much more higher end, to offer something totally new. So then they changed their target audience from the kids, so to speak, more to the adults, and made it into that high-end luxury thing while combining the original sort of product, which was the circus. So understanding your customers and understanding their wants and needs play a really huge part here. And simple things like conducting a client or customer satisfaction survey periodically is really important, as it will keep you on top of how they're feeling, what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying, which is often sometimes more valuable information. And it will also give you ideas on how you can improve things. The other things that you can look to do to stimulate growth is having an ideas culture within your team. I'm sure the guys at HR Solutions talk about this a lot on their other webinars, but having an ideas culture within your team, it makes people in your team feel empowered. And also, you as the business owner are not going to come up with every idea. People see things in different ways. People see things from a different perspective. So if your team feel comfortable sharing ideas, it's a fantastic place to be in. And then looking at your competitors, carrying out competitor analysis to see what they do well and differently, as that may give you some ideas. And finally, one last thing to mention on this section is it's also worth looking at your lowest grade or your least effective customers or segments and carrying out an exercise to see whether it's worth continuing with these, because this can often be quite eye-opening. You get into a habit potentially of going through the motions, keeping those customers, keeping that segment operating, when really you'd actually be in a better place if it wasn't there. Just not all the time, but it's worth doing that exercise just to see, because then at least you'll feel comfortable that everything we've got, all our customers, they are generating us profit. So the next question off the back of what we've just been saying is, when was the last time you implemented a new product or service to your offering? Was that within the last 6 months, within the last year, within the last 2 years, or 5 years or longer, or you literally haven't? Because it would be interesting to see how many of you have considered offering new products, new services to your customers, because that's obviously, it not just separates you, but it's obviously another income stream for your business, which leaves you less reliant. So it'll be interesting to see what people have said here.
I'll keep it open a bit longer. Okay, a few more seconds before they close. Okay, let's close and share the results.
Okay. So everyone has implemented a new service to their offering within the last year, which is good. I mean, I think there has to be, like, the sort of the theme of most of what we've been saying so far is around the balance. You know, you don't want to be bullet releasing new services and products without any real rhyme or reason, because it may overwhelm and sort of dilute your overall message. But I think once a year, that would sort of be in the ballpark of what you'd probably be looking to, maybe more frequently. But again, it's all about adding value. You know, if you find a product or service that can be released to add more value, you wouldn't just wait a year. So again, it's good to see that businesses out there, people on the call today, are innovating, because that's very, very important for multiple reasons. So moving on to the last two columns, the fifth column illustrates just how a 1% increase to your margin adds another 5% to your bottom line. So again, margins are really important, and I think the gross margin is something that can be looked at in a lot more detail when you are reporting in more detail. So like I said at the start, if you're reporting on just turnover and costs, you don't really know, if you've got multiple income streams, what is driving those margins. So I think that's where the reporting on line by line basis, or department by department, or service by service is really important, because it will allow you to gauge which products are achieving their margins that you expect and which ones aren't. And then the final column, it shows the impact of trimming your overheads by 10%, and that would add another 7% to your bottom line. So I think throughout COVID, we've been advising all businesses to stay really, really lean and mean wherever possible on their overheads. That should just be the sort of standard practice nowadays. But I think you can see the impact of being able to trim your overheads, shopping around for certain things, making sure that you're on top of it, can really help. But the thing that we find is cost-cutting exercises are often seen as boring and laborious. But remember, you don't necessarily have to be the one doing this. You can delegate this internally or even externally. But all businesses, in my opinion, should be carrying out periodic cost reviews. As we've mentioned, prices rise pretty frequently nowadays. And if we're encouraging you to increase your prices, other businesses, i.e. your suppliers, are likely to do the same if they aren't already. So it's important you're taking the necessary steps and you're staying on top of this, especially with things like, you know, phone contracts, insurance, light and heat, as very often they can lull you in with an introductory offer, and then before you know it, you're on a monthly payment plan or whatever, and you're not really thinking about it, and the costs just start creeping up gradually. So just make sure that you're comparing and you've got that sort of process in place. Yeah, the last thing is obviously your team and your staff are generally one of the most, or if not the most, expensive costs to any business. So as well as analysing whether everyone on your team is adding value, consider ways that you can potentially automate some of your processes in your business, because that will improve your effectiveness and save you money at the same time. So looking at improving productivity and efficiencies are now more important than ever, as the gap between businesses that are working effectively and the related profit levels is getting wider and wider. So there are a few things to sort of think about in terms of profitability, how you can make sure that your profit margins and your business is as profitable as possible. What I'd like to do now is bring my colleague Darren to give a few more thoughts based on his knowledge and experience around financing, refinancing, and the lending market in general. So what we'll do is we'll ask Darren some questions. There's a couple of polls in there as well, but if anyone's got any questions specifically for Darren, like we said, pop them in the chat and we'll either ask him now or we'll ask him at the end. So, hi Darren, the first question I'd sort of like to ask is, we've got this stigma attached in the business world, especially in the SME sort of space, of having debt in your business is bad. And certain business owners are actually quite proud of never having any debt. What are your thoughts on this?
So yeah, you're right. There is a stigma around taking on debt being a negative and bad thing, and it is just a stigma around it. I think that there is such thing as bad debt. I think it's if it's not manageable. I think as long as debt is manageable, then there's nothing wrong with it. I often use the analogy of owning your own home, in the sense that, you know, if you were to purchase your own home, people don't look at that as a negative thing. They don't look at it as a bad thing. In most cases, people often look at it as sort of a success and a proud thing to own. But what they don't consider is the hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of debt that they've just taken on in order to do that. So I think that as long as you change that mindset in that it's only bad if it's not manageable, or if it's only bad if you're not using that money to sort of look at the bigger picture and acquiring the asset that generates you more money, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just a mindset shift.
Yeah, totally agree. And we've had experiences with clients where they've come through that, they've taken on debt, they've realised it's actually a gateway to actually moving their business forward and getting closer to the success that they want. And they've realised that the only thing they really say at the end of it is, we should have done this sooner. So just on to a quick poll now. Do you have debt in your business? To the people out there listening in today, do you have debt in your business? It's just a simple yes or no. We're not going to delve into the specifics right now, but it would just be good for us to see how many people on the call today have debt in their business, as opposed to not having debt.
Okay, I'll keep it open for a little bit longer. And let's close the poll and share the results for you. There you go.
Wow, okay, that's interesting. So a third have debt and 2/3 don't. So like Darren mentioned earlier, I mean, debt can be used in a positive way to help fast forward your business, but I think you need to have a real reason for doing it. There's no point just blindly taking on debt just to have it sitting there. But if there's a real proper use for it, then we would recommend to maybe consider taking on debt as part of your overall business strategy, because we've seen it firsthand that the businesses that do it in the right way really helps them fast forward towards their goals. So Darren, I know that a lot of businesses with teams work on projects use sort of company credit cards as a way of giving autonomy to those individuals, but also putting on a cap to help them control debt levels and cost levels. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it works in certain situations. I think, like you say, with regards to teams or project-based, you know, what projects really is that if you have credit cards in place, you're able to set limits. You can, it allows you to forecast quite well as well, because there's no surprises. You know what the most that you can spend on it. It also just allows, like you say, in teams to have autonomy in order to be able to spend freely without those restrictions. Not just credit cards, but also there are sort of prepaid cards where you can preload money onto those cards. So whilst it's not taking on finance, it's still a form of card that allows teams to spend. But I would say that if you're looking to spend sort of large sums of money or borrow for a lengthy period of time, or it's a long project, it's quite an expensive form of finance. So if you're not clearing that credit card monthly, then there's probably better alternatives out there.
And I think that's sort of really the theme with finance, isn't it? There's so many things out there, and it's really having a proper conversation to find out what works for you and a bespoke package to the most of what you want. And I suppose that leads us on to the next question I really wanted to ask is sort of what products are currently out there for business owners looking to either, you know, self-preservate, like we've mentioned, tough times and everything, just getting yourself over the line to the next place where things start becoming a bit easier, or actually growing. I feel there's more appetite out there than ever to fund things like acquisitions, management buyouts, management buy-ins. And with the phasing out of all the government initiatives, do you have any advice for business owners right now?
Okay, so in terms of the products that are available, there's a number of different products out there, but you tend to best look at it in that there's a product that fits the purpose of what you need the money for. So it isn't just a case of going to get a loan for what you need, and a loan is the only thing out there. It's that, you know, if you're looking to buy equipment, there is, or a vehicle, there's forms of asset finance. If you're looking to build a property, there's development finance. If you're in retail, there's merchant cash advances. There's so many different products out there that fit the purpose for the funds, that it's a case of firstly identifying what you actually need the money for, and then working backwards to go, right, well, what products best suit that? Because you tend to find that that's the way you can get the cheapest deal. You know, if you were to go and get a loan in order to purchase an asset, you're going to be paying too much. It's going to be expensive. If you did a form of asset finance, it's going to be a lot cheaper. So yeah, there's a lot of products out there, but it's just a case of identifying the reason you need the funds or the purpose of the funds first.
Yeah.
In regards to appetite, there is a good appetite in the market at the moment, but it tends to be with sort of the high street banks and the tier one lenders. Their appetite is for like slam dunk deals that they know are going to get over the line very quickly with no risk to them whatsoever, good quality companies. The alternative lenders, or the second tier, there's still appetite, and they're sort of, they will take a chance more on the sort of riskier businesses, or the lower profit generating businesses. But there is still a lot of appetite out there, especially around mergers and acquisitions. And the last thing you said was around with the government incentives phasing out, what sort of advice? My advice would be to make sure your figures are up to date, and make sure that you're in the best position possible to plan for that future, so that you know if you need finance or if you don't need finance. But it's having that clarity around it to allow you to make that quick decision, because acquiring finance, what we've seen recently, is not just, you know, you can't just decide today that you're going to get finance and you have it in the bank later. It can be quite a lengthy process depending on what the underwriters need and the criteria. So make sure that you're in the best position to understand what you need and when you might need it.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I think, yeah, your point about having your books and records up to date is just vital, you know, because that's one of the biggest things we've found that slows things down when you haven't got up to date financial information. Without that, the lenders can't make decisions, which slows everything down. So really important. And what pointers can you give people listening around viability itself? Just mentioned about the figures. I know you've spent a bit of time working closely with underwriters directly who approve these sort of finance options and offers. What pointers can you give around the actual viability of things?
So firstly, lenders don't like negative balance sheets. They will probably steer clear away from them. So, you know, if you've got a positive balance sheet, that'll be the first thing. They then look at affordability and if you can service their debt. Now, in order to do that, what they do is they look at your profit before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. They refer to it as EBITDA. So they look at that figure, and then they reduce that by the amount of dividends that have been taken, just so they can work out how much cash is going to be in the business that can service their debt. They use a multiple of around 1.5 to 2, although that is sort of like on a sliding scale. But if you take that figure and you multiply it by either 1.5 to 2, it kind of gives you a rough amount of what debt you can service. Now, if you already have debt, you need to knock off your current balance off of that. That's a company figure, that what you can service as a whole, not what you can service per product. That's the kind of way they look at it. Now, each lender will have a different underwriting criteria, different underwriting process, but in general, that's how they'll sort of look at it. But in a nutshell, they like upward trends. You know, they like to see balance sheets going up. They like to see profit going up, or staying around the same. They definitely don't like to see it going down.
Yeah, which obviously presents its own challenges given the climate we've been in for the last couple of years. But yeah, I think that's why, like you've mentioned right from the start, it's being aware of where you're at as early as possible, where you're at, so you can plan accordingly. You know, a couple of months ahead of the game can really, really make a big difference in not only what you're able to acquire in terms of finance, but how quickly you can get it and various other things. So having that conversation and speaking up as early as possible is vital. So the last thing I'd like to ask, Darren, is based on the people that have got finance or people potentially on the call looking to perhaps acquire finance in the near future, how often should you be looking at actually refinancing that or looking at options around refinancing for the debt that you currently have?
I wouldn't leave it longer than a year, than 12 months. 12 months minimum, be looking at refinancing options, just like anything else. You know, you look at insurance every year, you might look at other overheads every year to see if you can reduce those costs. It's no different. Look at it at least annually. Now, you can look at it more frequently than that. Depends on the products that you're in. You might not really have a choice. For example, if you're in a form of invoice finance, you might be under contract, and it might be quite an expensive product to get out of. But it doesn't hurt to keep tabs on things. I would say that if you do jump around quite a lot to different finance providers, first of all, it's going to harm your credit score because of all the searches that they do on you. But also, it doesn't look good to the next lender that you keep moving. They're not necessarily going to want to loan you money knowing that you're not going to pay all their interest, you know, because you're going to move to someone else. So I would say probably between 9 months and a year is probably a good time, just to keep on track of things.
Perfect. So I'd like to just finish that off the back of what you just said, Darren, with a poll for the listeners today, particularly mainly the ones that currently have debt. But for those of you with debt, how often do you look at refinancing this? So every 6 months, yearly, as Darren's mentioned, bi-yearly, or you've not really explored refinancing options, you've taken on debt and just kind of stuck with that debt, with that provider, that rate for the length of the term so far. Because as Darren said, with the appetite changing quite often, sometimes you can actually save yourself quite a lot if you are to refinance your debt, or give yourself the peace of mind that, you know, the debt that we've got is at the most competitive rate. So it would be good to see where people with debt at the moment, or businesses with debt at the moment, are positioned here.
Okay, let's keep it open for a little bit longer. Okay, last few seconds. Okay. Shared results.
So as Darren's recommended, everyone looks to refinance their debt yearly, which Darren mentioned is probably the right sort of length of time to be considering it. Too frequently, you may not get the benefit, and too long, you may also miss out on the benefits. So yearly is like a good middle ground to be considering that. So thanks for that, Darren. And if anyone listening today would like to speak to Darren directly about their specific situation, we can't emphasize enough how important having that conversation is as soon as possible. He'll be able to have a chat with you directly away from the webinar today. And we'd like to hand over now, last but by no means least, Adam, our head of tax, who's going to share some thoughts on ways that you can incentivize your team. So Adam, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. So as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, when you're running your own business and you find loyal staff who stay with you, work hard, it's quite important to incentivize employees to stay with you instead of going to find another job elsewhere or doing their own things. You want to keep them in-house to help grow. Great way to do this is offering employee share schemes, which offer the employees the chance to obtain shares within the company. And along with that, they'll receive some great tax reliefs on them schemes, depending on what scheme you've got. Now, depending on what the value of your company is, how many shares you want to offer your employees, there's several different schemes that you can go for. Some small, some large, and they each have different things involved. The main ones consist of a share incentive plan, otherwise known as a SIP, Save As You Earn, SAYE, Enterprise Management Incentives, which is an EMI scheme, and a company share option plan, a CSOP. Now, before we go into the schemes, I think it's quite important that we need to make it clear on how each one is done, and the fact that you can control how many shares are issued and to which employees Conditions can also be put in place so that employees have to meet the conditions before they get the shares. Now that could be sales targets or length of employment or any other conditions, as long as they're within reason, that you want to put on them shares. So then it's also important to understand the different stages of the share plans, as if you're not aware of what each stage is, it can cause confusion if you're not sure of what the terms are and the differences between them. So there's 3 main stages to most of the share plans, if not all of them. First option is granting the options. Now, this would be when the conditions are agreed with your employees, you sign a contract together, and then in the agreement, that will state the employee will receive X amount of shares by reaching these conditions over this amount of time, and everything will be laid out in there, so it's all agreed and it's a legal contract between you and the employee. Now, the next stage would be when the options vest. This is when all the conditions that have been agreed in the previous agreement, they've all been met, and but the shares haven't been issued yet. So it's just the conditions have been met and the employee can officially now take the shares. Now, there's several reasons why an employee might not want to take the shares straight away. They might be in some tax planning or other situations, personal situations, they might not want them shares right at that moment. It's important to know you can set an expiry date. So once the options vest, you can then choose, say, for example, you have 24 months to exercise your option, otherwise you lose them shares. And then that just stops employees sort of holding on them shares for 10 years and never doing anything with them, but they're sitting in some pool, not doing anything essentially. So you can put that exercise date on, that expiry date on there. The final option would be the exercising of the options. Now, this is when the shares are vested, the employee is happy to take them shares, and then the shares are just issued to the employee, and then that employee now officially owns shares within the company. So now we're going to move on to what the schemes listed there actually are, what they involve. A couple of them are quite small, won't take long. The others are quite large. So first one, share incentive plan, otherwise known as the SIP. One of the most basic plans to issue shares with. On this scheme, you can issue shares to your employees and they're held within a trust on behalf of the client. So, not client, sorry, on behalf of the employee. So essentially the trust will hold the shares and the employee can't action upon them, so they can't vote or anything like that. They're just held on behalf of the employees. They're held in there for at least 5 years. And if they're held there for 5 years, then when the employee does get the shares, they don't have to pay any tax or NI on the value of them shares. If they do take them out before the 5 years, which will be agreed with you, then they have to pay tax and NI on the value. As if you're giving them a bonus to buy the shares with, they would have to pay tax and NI on that. And within this scheme, you can issue shares in 4 different ways to your employees. Now you can issue them free shares, so you can just give them shares up to the value of £3,600 per year. You can just give them to them. Partnership shares, which is where the employee will buy the shares off you, usually via deduction in the salary, and that's up to the value of £1,800 per tax year. You can match shares, so if an employee already holds X amount of shares, let's say 10 shares, for example, you can issue them 2 shares for every 1 share they have. So if they've got 10 shares already, you can issue them an extra 20 shares on top of that. And finally, dividend shares. So that would once again be if an employee already holds shares in the company and they're paid a dividend, they would essentially sacrifice that dividend and reinvest it in new shares. And that's, it's very simple plan, that one. It's for the smaller companies, looking just to hold maybe 1 or 2 employees. The managers, say, for example, keep them on and keep them invested. Next scheme, another one is quite small, is Save As You Earn. Again, it's a very basic scheme that allows employees to pay £500 a month into a scheme. At the end of the agreement, which is usually between 3 and 5 years, that employee then uses the money they've saved to purchase shares. As with the previous scheme, the shares are not liable to tax in NI, and on top of this, the shares, if the shares are transferred into an ISA or a pension at the end of the contract, then there's no capital gains to pay on them either. So they can get them, they can be issued, let's say £100 a share at the start. If they're worth £500 at the end of the 5 years, but they transfer that straight into an ISA or a pension, they don't have to pay capital gains tax on that increase in value. Now, next scheme, enterprise management incentives, much bigger scheme and the most popular scheme by far. It offers you a lot more flexibility, lowest tax rates. Usually someone's going for a scheme, this is the one that they will go for. Your company does have to have assets of less than 30 million, and it has to employ less than 250 staff, which most medium-sized companies will be under that anyway, so they should be able to do it. And this allows you to issue employees with a share value of up to £250,000 over a 3-year period to your employees. The value of the shares is agreed upon beforehand, so you do a company valuation, and that would be agreed by HMRC, and then the options are granted at that price. So say, for example, if your shares are worth £100 each, you would do a valuation, get that agreed, and then that is the set amount of what them shares are worth. Shares are then exercised usually in 5 years, so it's usually around that time that people start exercising the options, and then any increase from that value is not taxed. So for example, like I say, £100 per share, if you granted the options at £100 per share, and then in 5 years time those shares are worth £500 each, the employee will buy them shares from you for £100 each, and then if they sold them straight away for £500 each, they don't have to pay the tax on that £400 increase. They wouldn't have to pay any tax. The employee is then able to, so the £100 that they buy them for as well, if they physically buy them from you for £100, there's no tax or NI due on that, even though the share is worth £500 now. They buy them for the original share value, there's no tax or NI due on that purchase. You can also provide the shares at a discounted price, effectively giving them, your employee, the shares for free. The only thing around, if you give them for free or a discounted value, they do then have to pay tax and then NI on the difference. So if the shares are worth £100 and you give them for free, they would have to pay tax on £100. If you offer them for £50 each, they'd have to pay tax on the £50 difference. That would go through the payroll and essentially go on like an additional salary on that month's payroll, and they'd pay the tax and NI through their employment. Other great thing about EMI shares is that unlike the other share schemes, so long as the shares are held from 2 years of the date of grant, they automatically qualify for business asset disposal relief, which means even when your employees sell the shares, they're taxed at a flat rate of 10% on the increase from the purchase price. So if they were valued £500 when the employee obtained them, and they sold them for £1,000, they would pay 10% up to an increase of £1 million, which is quite a chunk of money. So 10% on that increase of £500, automatic, as long as they've held them for 2 years. Usually it'd be a case of they have to be a director or they have to hold over X amount within the company. None of that matters, as long as the only restriction is they have to hold it for 2 years. The final scheme is company share option plan, CSOP. So very similar to enterprise management. It's aimed at the bigger companies. So there's no restriction on your assets and your amount of employees that you can have, but because that restriction is removed, you can only issue £30,000 per employee. Obviously, under an EMI scheme, you've got £250,000 per employee. Under CSOP, it's only £30,000 per employee. There is some also additional restrictions around granting and the vesting process. For example, you can't vest for at least 3 years after the grant, so you can't grant the shares and then a year later vest them. There has to be a 3-year period. There is other restrictions as well, but that would sort of go around each company as well, so you'd have to discuss that as you go in. Depending on the company's situation and how you'd like to incentivize the employees, all the schemes have something to offer for you. Could potentially go a long way to helping your business, keeping them loyal employees, keeping them within the business, helping you so then they can help grow your business and, you know, obviously keeping them for many years to come. Based on everything obviously we've just gone through, just like to do a quick poll to see, you know, what people's thoughts are and how they're thinking. So how would you usually like to incentivize an employee if you want to keep them on? Say, for example, you know, you're growing a business and you want to keep your managers on, or someone's deciding about leaving, you want to try and encourage them to stay on. So would you do one of the share schemes, one of the ones we've just gone through? Would you issue them you know, an annual salary increase? Would it just be a bonus or a reward, a one-off, or any other benefits that you may be thinking of? So I'll give you a minute or so to do that.
Okay, we're still getting votes. Keep it open a little bit longer.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, I'll close the poll
Okay.
and share the results.
Okay, salary increase and bonus rewards, which is quite often ones that people go for. I usually think people don't think of the share schemes, but they are a great way to incentivize employees. If an employee's got a percentage in your business, the better the business does, the better they do. So they're more incentivized to actually work hard, stay longer, you know, and help you with the business and help you grow that business. Obviously, okay, you might give away 5% of your business, but 95% of a bigger business is better. So there is other incentives as well to obviously offer your employees. You don't necessarily have to do a share scheme. They're not the only one that can be offered. So there's some other options. We're quickly just going to run through them and just so you sort of see what your options are. So some of the popular ones. So medical benefit. Nowadays, especially after COVID and all the issues where that medical benefit is a great thing that, you know, employees are looking for now. A lot of employees actively look for that when looking for a new job or looking to stay or looking for benefits, especially with increasing pressures on NHS. You know, waiting times are becoming more and more with NHS. So offering that private medical sometimes works better than a salary increase, because you can increase their salary, they're going to pay for medical, it's just going to go straight on medical. Whereas if you offer it to them, they only have to pay the tax and NI on whatever that cost is. So it's a great one to look at. It's a small one, but it works great for employees. Another one is so electric cars. Electric cars are great at the moment for offering employees. The rates from HMRC are as low at 2%, potentially going up to 3%, but even at 3%, still a great rate to be paying tax on. So the way it works is your employee would only pay tax and NI at 2% on the value of the car. So if the value is worth £20,000, 2% of that is whatever, and then they pay their 20% or 40% on that amount. It works out you're paying about £100-200 tax on, you know, a 20-30 grand car. Great incentives. And if you're already providing vehicles to your employees, it might be worth looking at changing to electric cars, as it's a great way, you know, for them to save the tax they'd be paying on a diesel or petrol car is far above what they would be paying on a electric car. Another one is employee-owned trusts. If you're looking at exiting the business altogether, say for example, or selling the majority of the shareholding, might be worth looking at employee-owned trust or an EOT. This is where trust is owned by the employees and set up and purchases the shares from you. In this scenario, you wouldn't have to pay any capital gains tax on a disposal, and the employee can receive a tax-free bonus, £3,600 per year. Also gives them, the ability to start making decisions within the company and, get a bit of ownership. So once again, like a share scheme, incentivizes them to work harder and to grow the business. Then there's little things like office parties, days out. You can pay £150 per head per year on any party. Doesn't have to be a Christmas party, so long as it's an annual event and it's open to all employees. So just summer barbecue, for example, £150 per head, and it's tax-free for the employees. You can get it as a tax-deductible expense as well. And sometimes, having them social events, having them days, nice days, are great to have. I find that staff really appreciate having these events. If it's a Christmas party or, just a day out or anything like that. There's lots of companies out there that don't do anything like that for their employees. So sometimes little things like that can go a long, long way for keeping employees. Now, the list of benefits and incentives and things you can offer your employees is endless. We could sit here for days going on and on about them. So the above are just a few options, but if there's any other options you want to discuss or anything you can think of that I haven't brought up here, by all means, feel free to get in contact. More than happy to go through them with you and talk about them. But that's all from me on all of that. So I believe it's back to you, Joe, is it?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That was lots of really good, insightful information there, and I think it's one of the questions we get asked a lot by business owners. Share schemes to me just seem like a minefield, and I think you've clarified the key concepts of the main ones really well there. So, if anyone would like to chat to Adam in depth or have a little bit more discussion about your own personal situation, please get in touch with Adam, and he'll be able to have a chat with you. But yeah, I think that concludes the areas that we were going to talk about. We were going to open the floor to some questions, but I am conscious of the time, so I don't know if we've got time for that. Greg, I'm not sure what you're thinking about the questions, because I'm conscious we have gone over a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions that we might just run through, as long as you guys are okay for time.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
So probably a very simple one to start with. This person says they've never done a cash flow forecast before. Do you give them any tips as to where they could start?
Yeah, I mean, we're well aware of this. We've set up templates to help businesses who haven't done a cash flow forecast before, and we'd be happy to share those templates with anyone that would like them. And we'll also look to spend time with you to review it afterwards, and give you some advice on how you can possibly improve it. And like what we said at the start, maybe add in some scenarios that will help you even more with your decision making. So yeah, if you'd like a copy of that template, please get in touch. We'll be happy to provide it to you.
That's great, thank you. There's another one. This one's linked more about profitability. So this person's sort of worried about increasing their prices because they're scared that they'll start losing customers. I mean, I guess they're asking for reassurance as to any reassurance you can provide them that increasing prices won't scare off their customers.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's quite a common one as well. People say to us quite often, like, if I increase my prices, the customers might leave. But I think, firstly, if we're talking about an inflationary increase, you should sort of jump on it and do it to an extent. Your costs are going up by that level. So although it's not nice, it's not ideal in this situation, it's very difficult for people to argue, because you're ultimately just keeping pace. You're not even improving your own situation. But maybe initially make the increase in amount you feel comfortable with, and just be honest when you're explaining why you're having to do it, to allow you to keep up as a business and continue to deliver standards. Many of your customers will be doing similar things. So the increase is likely to be expected somewhat. The alternative is ultimately watching your margins dwindle year on year, and as your suppliers raise your prices, it's more difficult for you to compete at a viable level. Pricing is really a huge area, and it's really worthy of a webinar all to itself. But I feel you're unlikely to ever reach a perfect for any given product and service to every single customer, as pricing really is relative to the value in which the buyer or user perceives or does receive. So some people value higher than others, and that's why I think creating a form of sort of options or spread for customers allows you to group more of them within an acceptable pricing band. Because if you just literally have one flat price, chances are certain customers might actually pay more, and certain customers you've now alienated because they're not quite willing to pay that, but they would pay for a diluted version, so to speak. So having a range would really help you sort of target different customers. And I'd just look at whether your offering's wide enough in terms of options. And the last thing I'd look at, testing the market. You don't necessarily have to increase all your prices to all your customers straight away. Look at what your competitors are charging as well, and why, and gaining feedback from your customers around specific elements of products and services they really value, because this is often one of the misconceptions. You believe that your customers value this particular part of your service, when actually when you ask them, they're not as fussed about that. They really love something else. And you might then be able to make a decision to scale back on the costs involved with the part that they're saying they don't particularly value too much, and all of a sudden you can pass some of those savings in costs onto your customers by making the price increase slightly less. So getting that dialogue and interaction with your customers is really important as well. But I think just testing increases on a small scale to start off with to build your level of comfort.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think it is really important, and I think everybody out there is expecting price rises from all of their suppliers, and you not doing it is yes, the client might appreciate it, but it's not going to help you in the long term. You know, as a professional services business, I rely on people, and my staff expect pay rises every year. So if you're not increasing your prices accordingly, then everyone's going to start losing money. So it is important to sort of not be afraid to do it. So I've got another one around somebody saying they're being asked to look at their numbers more regularly than they currently do. How important is it really? So that's going through the management information.
Yeah, I mean, personally, to us. I mean, we're in this industry, so we would say it's important, but honestly, it is so vital. You perhaps, as the business owner on the top level, don't necessarily need to look at every single number in your business every day. And I think this is what daunts a lot of people. They feel that it needs to be at an extreme level where they're taking every single penny in their business on a daily basis. That's too much. It's information overload, and it'll probably confuse you more than actually help you. So one thing that we encourage business owners to do is imagine that you were taking a month off, whether that's a holiday, a sabbatical, or any other reason, but you're off for a month and you can only see 5 to 10 pieces of real headline information. And off the back of that, you need to make a decision on whether your business is running smoothly. So this is where we discuss with business owners around KPIs. So what are the key headline pieces of information you need to see? Include we're on track, or we're running where we should be, or we're doing where we should be. And that can help you sort of weed through the real minute detail and get to the key bits of information you need. For example, if your forecast showed that based on your conversion rate, you need to generate 10 leads a week, and your KPI report 3 days into the week showed that you only generated 1, now you'd be able to drill down into the detail to see what was going on. But if it was showing 12, for example, you're already ahead of your target, and you can relax a little bit knowing that the report is showing that you're well on track, and actually in this case ahead of the game. So looking at your numbers on a regular basis is really, really important, but it's the numbers that you look at are just as important, you know. So don't just necessarily think you have to basically screen read every single number on your management accounts every single month. Look at the key numbers of real value, and the ones that are the drivers of your KPIs. So that's often one of the big problems that we find, where business owners are just overwhelmed with it all. And I think using that sort of analogy of being away for a month, stripping it back and saying, if you can only see a handful of your numbers, what numbers would you really need? It's a great place to start.
That's great. Thanks, guys. I think that's probably all that we've got time for today. There are a few other questions being asked, but we'll try and circle back with those and maybe put them on the webinar page when we post the video. So I'm just going to sort of do some housekeeping to sort of close the webinar now, just to let people know that we are running a physical webinar with Nordens on the 7 key successes in September. So Joe and his team will go through a bit more detail into some of the things he's covered today and other aspects of the 7 key successes. So if you are interested, there is a link on the slide in front of you, but we will circle back with a link for you to make it easy for you to book if you would like to come. We also have some other, sorry, my mouse isn't clicking. We also have some other training courses coming up, which we've got managing conflict at work, disciplinary and grievance, quality inclusion, and managing poor performance. If you're interested in any of those, then they are available to book on our training website as well, and the link will be followed after the webinar. We also have some health and safety courses coming up. So these are more around compliance, making sure that your team have the right things in place. Mental health ambassador, emergency first aid at work, mental health first aid and food safety. Got a variety of different dates for you. If you are interested in attending, please do let us know. The mental health ambassador is on online webinar, whereas the others will be physical events. And then we've also got a few more webinars scheduled. Immigration, the latest developments, and trans equality at work, very important topics in the current climate. And we're always adding new webinars to our program, so please, if you're not already on our news list, register and we'll keep you up to date with those. Lots of content coming in terms of health and safety webinars as well. Update on health and safety, executive prosecutions, directors' responsibilities in health and safety, fire safety laws, and safeguarding in the workplace. All very important things to know when you're running a business. As I mentioned, if you've not already signed up to our newsletter, please do, and there'll be an easy link that comes out after this webinar. We have got some questions that we didn't get to today, so we will try and circle back with those. But if any other questions come in from the delegates today, please do email us at inquiries@hrsolutions-uk.com, and we'll make sure that the team at Nordens get access to those. And we will follow up with some feedback as well in terms of asking you how you found the webinar and what other webinars you'd like to see from us.
And one final poll that I've just launched on the screen. So if you'd like us to follow up with you after today on any of our services or for Nordens to follow up, please let us know. Okay.
Okay. So that just leads me to say thank you to Joe and the team at Nordens. Very insightful again, as usual. And we're looking forward to our seminar with you in September as well. So thank you for your time, everybody. I will close the webinar.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Very well. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.